When the studio lights went dark on November 14th, 1974, no one imagined what Johnny Carson was really facing. Lucille Ball, America's most beloved comedian, was standing backstage with tears streaming down her face. And what Johnny did next stopped The Tonight Show dead in its tracks and created a moment that 40 million Americans would never forget. But here's what nobody knew. Not the producers, not the audience, not even Johnny himself. Behind those famous red curls and that legendary smile, Lucille Ball was carrying a secret so devastating that it would bring her to her knees on live national television. Coming up, you'll discover the 7 words that shattered Johnny Carson on live TV, the hidden connection between 2 legends that changed late-night television forever, and the moment of raw vulnerability that 40 million viewers witnessed, but few truly understood. This isn't just another Hollywood story. This is about what happens when the masks come off and legends become human. I see messages all the time in the comment section that some of you didn't realize you didn't subscribe. So, if you could do me a favor and double-check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's simple. It's the free thing that anybody that watches this show frequently can do to help us here. So, please do double-check if you've subscribed, and thank you so much, because you're on this journey with us, and I appreciate you for that. Thursday, November 14th, 1974. The time was exactly 11:31 p.m. NBC Studios in Burbank, California was buzzing with electric energy that you could feel in the air. The Tonight Show was the most watched program in late-night history, and tonight was supposed to be something special, a celebration, a reunion, a moment of Hollywood magic. Ed McMahon had just finished his thunderous introduction. Doc Severinsen and his orchestra were playing the iconic Tonight Show theme. 300 people in the studio audience were on their feet, applauding before the guest had even appeared. And watching from 40 million homes across America, families were gathered around their television sets, ready to laugh, ready to see their beloved Lucy do what she did best. The producers had planned everything down to the second. Lucy would walk out, trade jokes with Johnny, share hilarious Hollywood stories, and remind America why she was the undisputed queen of comedy at 63 years old. The segment was scheduled for exactly 18 minutes. Every camera was in position, every light was perfectly set. But backstage in the green room, something was happening that would change the course of television history. Lucille Ball was sitting alone on a small couch, her hands trembling so violently that she could barely hold the glass of water her assistant had brought her. Her makeup artist stood frozen in the doorway, watching something she'd never seen before. The stage manager kept checking his watch, knowing they had less than 4 minutes until Lucy was supposed to walk through that curtain, and Lucy herself was staring at a telephone that she had just hung up, a telephone that had delivered news so devastating that it had shattered her entire world in 30 seconds. To understand what happened that November night, you need to understand what Lucille Ball meant to America. And more importantly, you need to understand the secret she was carrying that no one in that studio knew about. Because this wasn't just about a television appearance. This was about 2 people, Johnny Carson and Lucille Ball, who had built their entire lives on making others laugh while hiding their own pain. In 1974, Lucille Ball wasn't just a celebrity. She was an institution. She had invented the television sitcom. She had broken every barrier that existed for women in entertainment. She had built a production empire that was worth more than most Hollywood studios. And she had done it all while making America laugh every single week since 1951. I Love Lucy had been the most watched show in television history. At its peak, more Americans watched Lucy Ricardo get into trouble than watched the presidential inauguration. When Lucy gave birth to little Ricky on the show, 44 million people tuned in. That was more viewers than watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. Lucy wasn't just famous. She was beloved. She was family. She was the woman that America trusted to make them forget their troubles for 30 minutes every week. But what America didn't know, what no one knew except the doctors, was that Lucy was dying. At exactly 4:47 p.m. that afternoon, Lucy had been sitting in her dressing room at NBC getting her hair styled for the show. Her assistant walked in with a telephone and a look on her face that Lucy would never forget. The caller was Dr. Marcus Rabin, Lucy's personal physician and longtime friend. His voice was shaking as he delivered the news that would change everything. Gary Morton, Lucy's husband of 13 years, had collapsed on a golf course in Palm Springs. He had suffered a massive heart attack. The paramedics had performed CPR for 11 minutes before they could get his heart beating again. He was now in the intensive care unit at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, unconscious and fighting for his life. The doctors didn't know if he would survive the night. Lucy dropped the phone. Her legs gave out beneath her. Her assistant caught her before she hit the floor. You see, Gary Morton wasn't just Lucy's husband. He was her salvation. And after her devastating divorce from Desi Arnaz in 1960, Lucy had fallen into the darkest period of her life. She had stopped eating. She had stopped sleeping. She had stopped laughing, which, for Lucille Ball, was like stopping breathing. Friends later said that Lucy had lost the will to live. The woman who had brought joy to millions couldn't find any joy for herself. Gary Morton had saved her. He was a comedian himself, not famous, not wealthy, but kind, patient, devoted. He had shown up at her door every single day with groceries and bad jokes and unconditional love, until Lucy finally started smiling again. He had given her 13 years of happiness, 13 years of peace, 13 years of feeling loved without conditions, and now he was dying in a hospital 100 miles away. And Lucy was supposed to go on television and be funny. Her first instinct was to cancel everything and race to Palm Springs. But the doctors told her there was nothing she could do. Gary was unconscious. They were still running tests. The next few hours were critical, but all anyone could do was wait. Lucy made an impossible choice. She would do the show. She would be professional. She would not let anyone see her pain. But sometimes the heart refuses to follow orders, and Lucy's heart was about to break wide open in front of 40 million people. At 11:32 p.m., the Tonight Show band began playing Lucille Ball's entrance music. The studio audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. Lucy stood behind the curtain, her hands pressed against her stomach, trying to stop the trembling. She had performed thousands of times in her career. She had faced cameras and audiences and critics and doubters. She had never once let fear stop her. But this was different. This wasn't stage fright. This was grief trying to claw its way out of her chest. She took one more breath. She thought about Gary lying in that hospital bed. She whispered something that only she could hear, and then she pushed through the curtain and stepped into the brightest spotlight in television. The audience erupted, 300 people cheering and applauding and calling her name. From home, 40 million Americans were smiling, ready to laugh, ready to be entertained by their favorite comedian. Johnny Carson walked toward her with that famous grin. He extended his hand, and the moment their hands touched, Johnny felt something that sent a chill down his spine. Lucy's hand was ice cold. It was shaking so hard that Johnny instinctively tightened his grip. And when he looked into her eyes, behind the stage makeup and the practiced smile, he saw something he had never seen in 12 years of hosting The Tonight Show. He saw terror. But Johnny was a professional. The cameras were rolling. 40 million people were watching. So he guided Lucy to her seat, cracked a joke about her being more popular than the president, and got his laugh from the audience. For the first 7 minutes, everything went according to plan. Lucy talked about her new special. She told a funny story about working with Bob Hope. She made the audience laugh exactly the way she was supposed to. The producers in the control room relaxed. Fred de Cordova, the show's legendary director, nodded approvingly. Whatever had been wrong with Lucy backstage, she was handling it like the professional she was. And then Johnny asked a simple question. He leaned back in his chair with that characteristic Carson warmth and said, "So, Lucy, after all these incredible years, after everything you've accomplished, what is the one thing in your life that you are most grateful for?" It was supposed to be an easy question, a softball that would let Lucy talk about her career, or her fans, or her legacy. The kind of question that every talk show host asks, and every guest has a rehearsed answer for. But the word grateful hit Lucy like a punch to the heart. She thought about Gary. She thought about him lying unconscious in that hospital bed. She thought about all the mornings he had brought her coffee, all the nights he had held her when she couldn't sleep, all the times he had told her she was beautiful when she felt broken. She thought about the possibility that she might never hear his voice again, and something inside Lucille Ball finally shattered. The tears came before she could stop them. Her voice cracked. Her shoulders began to shake. And then, for the first time in her 23-year television career, the woman who had made America laugh started sobbing uncontrollably on live national television. The studio audience went completely silent. 300 people frozen in their seats, not knowing what to do. In the control room, Fred de Cordova nearly dropped his headset. "Do we cut to commercial?" someone whispered frantically. But Johnny Carson didn't cut to commercial. He didn't crack a joke to lighten the mood. He didn't do any of the things that a professional talk show host was supposed to do. Instead, Johnny Carson did something that had never happened in the history of The Tonight Show. He reached across his desk and took Lucille Ball's trembling hand in his own. And what he said next would change everything. Johnny Carson held Lucy's hand and looked directly into her eyes. The cameras were still rolling. 40 million people were watching. The producers were panicking. But Johnny didn't care about any of that. "Lucy," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "what is really going on?" Lucy shook her head, tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup that had taken an hour to apply. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't talk about it. Not here, not now." Johnny squeezed her hand tighter. "Then don't talk. Just breathe. I'm right here." The studio audience sat in stunned silence. Nobody applauded. Nobody whispered. They simply watched as something raw and real unfolded before their eyes. What happened next broke every rule of television. Johnny Carson stood up from behind his famous desk. He walked around it slowly, never breaking eye contact with Lucy, and then he sat down right next to her on the guest couch and put his arm around her shoulders. Ed McMahon, who had been Johnny's sidekick for over a decade, later said that moment was when he realized Johnny Carson wasn't just a talented entertainer. He was a genuinely good man. "Lucy," Johnny said gently, "you have spent your entire life making other people happy. You have given this country more joy than anyone in the history of television. If you need to cry right now, that's okay. You've earned it." And something in those words broke down the last wall that Lucy had been trying to hold up. She looked at Johnny, then at the cameras, then at the audience. And then she said something that made the control room go absolutely silent. "Gary is in the hospital," she whispered. "He had a heart attack this afternoon. They don't know if he's going to make it through the night." Johnny's face went pale. "Lucy, why are you here? Why didn't you cancel?" Lucy let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Because I'm Lucille Ball. Because I'm supposed to be strong. Because I didn't know what else to do." She paused, struggling to find words. "After Desi and I divorced, I wanted to disappear. I'm not exaggerating, Johnny. I wanted to disappear. I had given that man everything. I had built an empire with him. And then it was all gone. The audience was completely still. Not a single person moved. Gary found me at my lowest point," Lucy continued, her voice breaking. "I wasn't taking care of myself. I had pushed away everyone who loved me. And this man, this patient, kind, wonderful man, refused to give up on me." She wiped her eyes with the handkerchief Johnny had quietly pressed into her hand. "He showed up at my house every single day. He brought me food. He sat with me for hours without saying anything, just being there. And slowly, day by day, he brought me back to life." Lucy looked directly into the camera, and 40 million Americans felt like she was talking directly to them. "He saved me. He gave me 13 more years of happiness. And now I might lose him. And I don't know how to survive that." Johnny Carson, who had interviewed presidents and kings and the biggest stars in the world, found himself at a loss for words. In 12 years of hosting The Tonight Show, he had never witnessed anything this raw, this honest, this profoundly human. "Lucy," Johnny finally said, "do you know what I see when I look at you right now?" She shook her head. "I see the bravest woman I've ever met. Not because you're not crying, but because you're letting yourself cry. Because you're showing 40 million people that even Lucille Ball is human. And that takes more courage than any comedy routine you've ever performed." The studio audience began to stir. Someone in the back started clapping softly. Then another person joined, and another, until all 300 people were on their feet, not applauding a performance, but honoring a moment of genuine human vulnerability. And then, from somewhere in the crowd, a woman's voice called out, "We love you, Lucy." The floodgates opened. More voices joined in. "We're praying for Gary. You're not alone. We love you." Lucy looked out at the audience, tears still streaming down her face. And for the first time that night, she smiled. Not her performance smile, not her camera smile. A real smile. "I love you too," she whispered. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in the studio, not just on the show, but in the very nature of what television could be. Johnny Carson turned to the camera and said something that would become legendary. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I do this job. Not for the jokes, not for the ratings. For moments like this. But the most powerful part of this night was still to come. What happened in the next 10 minutes had never occurred in the history of network television, and it would never be forgotten. Johnny Carson made a decision that could have ended his career. He looked at his producer through the camera and said, "Fred, we're throwing out the rest of the show tonight. Cancel the other guests. This is more important." In the control room, Fred de Cordova hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then he nodded. The other scheduled guests for the evening, a popular singer and a comedian, were quietly told their segments were canceled. Nobody complained. They understood. Johnny turned back to Lucy. "I want you to tell America what Gary means to you. Not as Lucille Ball the star, as Lucy the woman. Can you do that?" Lucy took a shaky breath. "I can try." And for the next 8 minutes, Lucille Ball did something she had never done in her entire career. She stopped performing and started being real. She talked about the day she met Gary at a dinner party in 1960, how he had made her laugh for the first time in months, how he had asked for her phone number without even knowing who she was. She talked about their wedding in 1961, how small and private it had been, how Gary had written his own vows and made her cry before they even got to the altar. She talked about the small things, the way Gary made her coffee every morning, exactly the way she liked it, the way he rubbed her feet after long days on set, the way he never once made her feel like she had to be Lucille Ball the legend instead of Lucy the person. "He gave me permission to be ordinary," Lucy said. "And you have no idea how extraordinary that is when the whole world expects you to be amazing every single second." The audience was weeping. Men who had never cried in public were wiping their eyes. Women were holding hands with strangers in the seats next to them. Johnny let Lucy speak without interruption. He didn't try to guide the conversation or make jokes or do any of the things a talk show host normally does. He simply listened, the way a friend listens when someone they care about is hurting. When Lucy finally finished speaking, Johnny stood up. And then he did something unprecedented. He pulled Lucy to her feet and hugged her right there on national television. A full, genuine embrace that lasted nearly 30 seconds. The studio audience rose for a standing ovation that went on for over 2 minutes. People were crying openly. The people were calling out their love and support. It was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed on a talk show. And somewhere in a hospital room 100 miles away, Gary Morton had regained consciousness. A nurse had wheeled a small television to his bedside so he could watch his wife on The Tonight Show. When he saw Lucy crying, he started crying too. When he saw Johnny hug her, he tried to reach toward the screen. And when the audience started chanting, "We love you, Lucy," Gary Morton whispered 3 words that the nurse would later say she would never forget. "That's my girl." Back in Burbank, Johnny Carson turned to the camera one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been doing this show for 12 years. I've talked to presidents and movie stars and every kind of celebrity you can imagine. But I want you to know that what you just witnessed is the most important thing that has ever happened on this stage." He paused, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. This woman invented television comedy. She broke every barrier there was to break. She built an empire. But tonight, she did something even more incredible. She showed us that behind every legend is a human being who loves and fears and hurts just like the rest of us. He turned to Lucy one more time. "Thank you for trusting us with your heart tonight. Now, go be with your husband." The show cut to commercial, and when it returned, Johnny simply said goodnight and ended the program early. But the story was far from over, because what happened after the cameras stopped rolling would remain a secret for nearly 2 decades. The moment the red light on the cameras went dark, Johnny Carson sprang into action. He grabbed Lucy's hand and led her through the backstage corridors toward his private dressing room. His assistant was already on the phone, arranging transportation. "There's a helicopter on the roof," Johnny told Lucy. "It can get you to Palm Springs in 40 minutes. I'm coming with you." Lucy stopped walking and stared at him. Her makeup was ruined. Her eyes were swollen. She looked nothing like the glamorous star who had walked onto that stage 3 hours earlier. "Johnny, you don't have to do that. You've already done so much. More than anyone has ever done for me." "I know I don't have to," Johnny said firmly. "I want to. Nobody should face something like this alone. Not tonight. Not ever." Lucy started to protest again, but Johnny raised his hand gently. "Lucy, you've spent your entire life taking care of everyone else. Your cast, your crew, your fans, your family. Tonight, let someone take care of you." She had no words left. She simply nodded. At 12:47 a.m., a helicopter lifted off from the roof of NBC Studios in Burbank. Inside were Johnny Carson, Lucille Ball, and a silence that was heavier than words. The lights of Los Angeles faded beneath them as they flew through the darkness. Lucy stared out the window the entire flight. Johnny didn't try to make a conversation. He didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He simply sat beside her, a steady presence in the midst of her storm. They arrived at Cedars-Sinai Hospital at 1:34 a.m. Johnny stayed in the waiting room while Lucy went to see Gary in the intensive care unit. He drank terrible hospital coffee. He paced the hallways until a nurse asked him to sit down. He called his wife to tell her he wouldn't be home until morning. She told him she understood. She told him she was proud of him. He refused to leave. Hours passed. The waiting room filled with early morning light. Nurses changed shifts. Other families came and went. And still, Johnny Carson sat there, waiting. At 3:47 a.m., Dr. Marcus Rabin emerged from the ICU with news that made Lucy collapse against the wall with relief. Gary Morton was going to survive. The heart attack had been serious. He would need surgery and months of rehabilitation. His diet would have to change. His lifestyle would have to change. But he was going to live. When Lucy emerged from Gary's room at 6:15 a.m., she found Johnny Carson still there, still waiting, still refusing to leave until he knew she was okay. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were tired. But he stood up the moment he saw her. She walked toward him and hugged him without saying a word. They stood there for a long moment, 2 legends, 2 friends, 2 human beings who had shared something that words could never fully capture. And then Lucy said something that Johnny would carry with him for the rest of his life. "You showed me tonight what it means to be a real friend. I will never forget this, never, as long as I live." Johnny simply smiled. That's what friends do. But here's what America didn't know for almost 20 years. That night in the hospital changed Johnny Carson forever. He had spent his career making people laugh. But holding Lucy's hand in that waiting room, watching her face when the doctor delivered the good news, made him realize something profound. Entertainment wasn't the only thing his platform could provide. Connection mattered. Compassion mattered. Being there for people in their darkest moments mattered more than any applause. In the months that followed, Johnny began quietly using The Tonight Show to feature real human stories. He invited ordinary people who had overcome extraordinary circumstances. He gave voice to causes that mattered. And, in complete secrecy, he established a foundation that would help thousands of people dealing with medical crises and family emergencies, inspired by that one night when Lucille Ball needed help, and he chose to be there. Television historians mark that November 14th, 1974 episode as the moment late-night television changed forever. Before that night, talk shows were strictly about entertainment. Celebrities came on to promote their projects, tell rehearsed stories, and maintain carefully crafted images. Showing real emotion was considered unprofessional. Vulnerability was seen as weakness. The unwritten rule was simple: keep it light, keep it funny. Never let them see you cry. After that night, everything shifted. Other hosts began making space for genuine moments. Guests started sharing real struggles alongside their successes. The invisible wall between celebrity and humanity began to crumble. Television stopped being just a performance and started becoming a place where real human connection could happen. Barbara Walters, who built an entire career on emotional celebrity interviews, later said something remarkable about that night. What Johnny did gave all of us permission to ask the real questions. He showed us that audiences didn't just want entertainment. They wanted connection. They wanted to know that the people they admired were human, just like them. Oprah Winfrey cited that episode as one of the inspirations for her entire approach to television. She said it taught her that the most powerful moments happen when people stop performing and start being real. In 1992, when Johnny Carson retired from The Tonight Show after 30 years, he mentioned that night in his final monologue. The audience fell silent as Johnny spoke about the moment that had defined his career more than any joke or celebrity interview ever could. "There are moments in this job," Johnny said, his voice thick with emotion, "that remind you why it matters. Moments that are bigger than ratings or applause. Lucy gave me one of those moments back in 1974. She reminded me that the best thing we can do on television is be real with each other." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "And I've tried to honor that lesson every single night since." The clip of Lucy's breakdown has been viewed over 50 million times across every platform imaginable. It appears in documentaries about television history. It's studied in film schools across the country. It consistently ranks on lists of the most emotional moments ever broadcast. But more importantly, it continues to help people to this day. Therapists have reported using that clip to help patients understand that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. Showing your pain doesn't make you less than. It makes you human. And being human is the bravest thing any of us can be. Gary Morton lived another 25 years after that heart attack, passing away peacefully in 1999. Lucy remained devoted to him every single day until her own death in 1989. Among her personal belongings, her children found a handwritten letter from Johnny Carson that Lucy had kept in her nightstand for 15 years. The letter was never made public, but those who saw it said it contained just 3 words: "Real moments matter." On that November night in 1974, Lucille Ball walked onto the Tonight Show stage carrying a secret that was destroying her from the inside. She expected to hide her pain behind her famous smile. She expected to be funny. She expected to be America's Lucy. Instead, she became something more powerful. She became human. And in doing so, she gave 40 million Americans permission to be human, too. Johnny Carson could have cut to commercial. He could have protected the show. He could have done exactly what any producer would have advised. Instead, he chose humanity over showmanship. He chose connection over entertainment. He chose to be present with someone who was suffering, even if it meant breaking every rule of television. And that single choice created a moment that America has never forgotten. If this incredible story of vulnerability, friendship, and the power of genuine human connection moved you, make sure you subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. We bring you powerful stories about the moments that changed television and touched hearts forever. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that it's okay to not be okay. That showing your pain is not weakness. That the people who truly love you will hold your hand through the darkest moments. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Tell us about a time when someone showed up for you when you needed it most, because that's what real friendship looks like. And that's a moment worth remembering forever. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Until next time, remember, real moments matter.